In this video, I'm going to rank all 8 tracks in Wave 2 of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's Booster Course Pass from worst to best. This list is strictly my opinion, and I made this list based on my excitement for each track, and that is based on how both the track looks and how it could play out online, since obviously we don't have access to the courses just yet. I should also mention that for the most part, I'm really excited for this wave to drop this Thursday. I got a lot of fun content planned for the coming weeks, so I hope you stick around for the ride if you're new here. Anyways, without further ado, let's start giving her, bud. At the bottom of our list, we got Mario Circuit 3. I actually liked this track a little bit back in Mario Kart Wii, but honestly, I just don't think this track is going to be enjoyable in this game. It's a short track with a bunch of off-road, which means most races are probably going to end really badly for the racers who decide to front run, whether a shock is used or not. You know, the more I think about it, this track has the length of GBA Mario Circuit and the off-road shortcut potential of Cheese Land. I hope it turns out alright, but in terms of how this track will play out online, I'm very pessimistic. Especially too because if you compare Mario Circuit 3 to the likes of GBA Mario Circuit, at least you can do the ending shortcut shroomless. The same goes for Donut Plains 3 with the beginning shortcut. Toad Circuit may not have any shroomless shortcuts, but there also isn't as much off-road you can shroom through as there is on Mario Circuit 3. So, on top of the fact that every shortcut on this track requires a mushroom, there are a ton of shortcuts on this track. It sounds fun at first, but I feel like this track is going to be a nightmare if you're playing in the front, and if you're playing in the back, you're going to have to pray that if there's a shock that you can dodge it, or your race is over. Altogether, while I'm pessimistic about how Mario Circuit 3 will function online, the track itself is alright. We'll see what happens. From this point forward, I'm excited for every track. Instead of it being from worst to best, it's from pretty good to amazing. With that said, number 7 is New York Minute. Look, I think this track has a lot of potential to be really fun. This track also looks beautiful. However, in my analysis video, I concluded that Sydney Sprint would get the Paris Promenade treatment and that you drive the track in reverse, most likely on lap 3. While I don't mind that New York Minute is most likely getting the Tokyo Blur treatment where you'll drive through a different route each lap, it's just not as exciting. Additionally, this was the one Mario Kart Tour track I have played, and while I only played one variant, it just wasn't that fun or exhilarating. So that already isn't that great of a sign. But I do think it could be a fun track if each lap is great in its own way. The potential is definitely there, no doubt about it. I just don't think New York Minute is super duper exciting. But hey, if I'm proven wrong, it's a huge W because that's another great track in this game. Coming in at number 6 is the other Mario Kart Tour track coming through, Sydney Sprint. The music slaps, it looks like a really fun track, and the graphics have honestly grown on me since my analysis video, where I mentioned how I thought this track could look just a bit better. I know this is supposed to be Sydney. I mean, the Opera House is right there. But if I'm being honest, this gives me Yoshi Park vibes from Mario Super Sluggers. It's a fun environment. I've never played this track before, and it looks like it has a really nice flow with a lot of variety. The ramp section, the quick glider section, and the big turn out in the sun, I'm looking forward to it. One last thing I'll mention is this path with the ramp. I even tried researching Sydney Sprint gameplay in Mario Kart Tour, and I have no clue how this split path section is going to play out, which is very intriguing. From another perspective, we can get more of a glimpse at what's to come, but it's too hard to tell the impact this path is going to have on this track, at least from my perspective. Maybe the arrows indicating where the drive were taken out for the trailer? I guess we'll find out soon. Next up was a big surprise to me when I watched the trailer. Number 5 is Snow Land. A very pleasant surprise when I saw how this track looked. It looks like a really fun track with a lot more potential than what meets the eye. Now, I'm assuming that if you were to drive off this cliff, you would be out of bounds since there's no way a shortcut that broken would exist in this game. With that said though, imagine if there were some wild shortcuts on this track, given that there are so many huge patches of snow with no fencing. The potential is definitely there, and I'm very curious to see if there are more shortcuts than we know of, especially in this off-road section here. From this angle, it looks like you can't shroom through the off-road and get back on the main road. I'm just really confused because Nintendo usually does a really good job at blocking off even the consideration of wild shortcuts that could be possible. But that does not seem to be the case here. I think this track will be great even if you can't leverage these huge patches of off-road, but who knows? We'll have all the answers later this week. I'm also very intrigued by the road textures. I'm assuming that the ice section is going to favor combos with higher traction, but I wonder what that means for the main road. It does seem like it does mess with your driving a little bit, but maybe it's just a texture thing and both the main road and the ice road have the same traction situation. Either way, this track looks awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Starting off the top half of our list is a track that I thought would be at the very bottom of a list like this if it made it into the Booster Course Pass. Kalimari Desert. Now, there are two problems with this track. First of all, the train. I don't think the train cycle is as unforgiving as it was in the previous iterations, but it's still a horrible thing if you have to wait for the train to cross. It completely ruins the flow of the race. Additionally, this track is full of off-road, which would make this track much more of a bagging track, which is not fun. However, I think both of these problems have been solved, more so the bagging problem. On lap 1, you will race on the regular Kalimari Desert. On lap 2, you will drive the first half of Kalimari Desert, then transition to driving on the train tracks. On lap 3, you will transition from the train tracks to the second half of Kalimari Desert. Apart from lap 1, this really saves this track from being really obnoxious. I'm not sure exactly what the train cycle is going to be like, but I think Nintendo understands how bad it is for the train to mess with the flow of the race, so it will most likely be designed so that as long as you aren't at a complete stop for half the race, you'll be good. It'll actually be really funny if you get punished for bagging in the event you miss the train cycle. You'd probably get the items to drive through the train like a star or a bullet bill, but it'd still be jokes, especially if you pulled the golden and triple shroom combo. All jokes aside, this change from the original Kalimari Desert is great, and I'm very optimistic that this track could be awesome. Coming in at number 3 is the brand new track for both this game and soon to come in Mario Kart Tour, Sky High Sundae. This track looks like a lot of fun, and a lot of that comes from how this track is fully in anti-gravity. On tracks like this, you can control your vehicle in the air after tricking as if you were underwater. This is very intriguing because being able to control your vehicle in the air creates a lot of shortcut potential. I don't know how likely this is, but keep hope alive. I also love the vibe of this track that comes from all the different colors or flavors of ice cream. A lot of energy on this track without a doubt, and I'm all for it. Another thing, the item set assortment is really interesting here, specifically in 2 sections. First of all, it seems like you can get an item box both inside the ice cream cone and on the outside of the landing zone as well. And it also seems like you can get a box from the item set on one of the split path sections when there's a regular item set right after. These are 2 situations where there is what seems like an extra item set before the traditional item set. It's pretty cool. With that said, that's Sky High Sundae. I'm super excited for this track. It looks really, really fun. Our runner-up is one of, if not the most iconic track in Mario Kart history, Waluigi Pinball. I've never played this track on Mario Kart Tour, but this track is very visually appealing. I'm a big fan of the neon colors contrasting the darker road. Now, as for the track itself, it's Waluigi Pinball. There aren't any shortcuts on this track unless Nintendo decided to really mix it up, which I actually really like. There isn't a single track in this game that has 0 shortcuts, which will really make this track stand out in what I see as a good way. Winning races on this track will be heavily based on running ability, and with the numerous turns on this track, there's even potential for this track to get a little technical. I will say, however, and I'm not sure how likely this is, but if you were to front run this track, I wonder if you could actually experience a lot of pressure on the long straight in the pinball section when it comes to actually avoiding the pinballs. It could get pretty toxic, but I'm very intrigued by the pinball elements. While I've never been a die-hard fan of Waluigi Pinball, it cannot be denied that this track is a certified beauty. That is why I'm really excited for this track after all. And taking the number 1 spot on my list is Mushroom Gorge. Look, as a standalone track, I already love Mushroom Gorge. The concept of bouncing off mushrooms as the main way of progressing through the track has always been one that I've really liked. But it's not number 1 on my list for that reason. It's number 1 on my list because of the potential it has to be the best track to drive in the whole game. In this game, if you release a mini turbo and trick off a bounce pad simultaneously, you can perform what's called a super bounce. Now, the properties of the mushroom on this track are different since, unlike the other bounce pads, you can actually slightly move in the air for alignment purposes. But if the super bounce technique works as it should, this track could be way better than we think. I mean, look at the cave section and how many mushrooms there are here, especially since there are 3 pads, which has never been the case before. The super bounce potential here is unprecedented. And the cherry on top, even the gap jump could be possible. This gap is definitely smaller than before, and there are shortcuts with either wider gaps or not a small dip from one side to the other. I'm telling you, this track could very well be the best track to drive in the game, and I think it has a very high chance of that being the case. Nintendo, don't disappoint us. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know in the comments your list of what tracks you're looking forward to from least to most. Everyone has a different mind, so I'm really curious to see what you guys think about these tracks. I think this wave could be a big improvement from Wave 1, and I really enjoyed Wave 1 for the most part. Only time will tell. But with that said, until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and keep on giving her, bud.